He man who is systematically trying to destroy everything I love, offered me the one thing I have wanted for 3 years, and for one long, terrible night, I considered giving him what he asked for. The message came in a plain envelope, hand-delivered to my studio, no return address. Inside was a single photograph and a single page. The photograph was of my little sister, Chloe, the sister who, 3 years ago, slept with my husband and helped him try to vote me out of the company I built from my mother's kitchen. The sister I raised. The sister I hadn't spoken to since the day her betrayal fell apart in a boardroom. In the photo, Chloe looked terrible, thin, frightened, older than her years. She was holding a newspaper the way hostages hold newspapers, to prove the date, to prove she was alive right now. The page was typed and short. It said that Chloe was in serious trouble the sender could make disappear, or make so much worse. It said Chloe owed the wrong people, had gotten in over her head after her fall from grace, and was now, the letter put it so gently, a liability being managed. And it said that all of this could end, that Chloe could be freed, protected, returned to me, in exchange for something simple. I just had to tell them what Diane Okafor was planning next. Just once. Just a little. And I had to tell no one. I sat in my studio, surrounded by little amber jars of the balm my dying mother taught me to make, holding a photo of the sister who broke my heart, and I felt the ground I'd spent 3 years rebuilding tilt underneath me. Because they'd found the one crack in me that all my success had papered over but never filled. They'd found Chloe. Let me take you back. My name is Rachel. If you've heard my story, you know the shape of it. I built a skincare company called Ren and Sage. From a single jar of balm, I trusted my husband and my little sister with it, and they used that trust to try to erase me. You know that I won. That I owned the name and the formula personally. That I walked out of that boardroom with everything and left them an empty shell. What the tidy version leaves out is the part that never healed. Because when people ask me about that day, they always want to talk about my husband. The affair, the coup, the satisfying collapse. And I let them, because it's the easy story. But my husband was never the wound. Losing a husband who'd stopped loving me was a clean cut. It healed. Chloe was the wound. Chloe is 10 years younger than me. When our parents died, I wasn't just her sister. I raised her. I paid for her braces. I taught her to drive. I sat in the front row at her college graduation and cried like a mother because I was the closest thing she had to one. When I built my company, I didn't hire a creative director and give her a job. I gave my baby sister a life because I wanted her beside me, because family was the whole point of building anything at all. And she betrayed me anyway. With my husband, in my own company, smiling. Winning back my company healed the money. Nothing healed Chloe. 3 years later, thriving, rebuilt, surrounded by a sisterhood of women who'd become the family I chose, I still had a Chloe-shaped hole in the center of me that I had simply learned to walk around. The principal, whoever he is, knew that. Somehow, he knew exactly where to press. I need you to understand the years between, because they matter. After the boardroom, Chloe's life came apart the way a life does when it was built on someone else's foundation. My ex-husband, once the shell company collapsed and the money froze, discovered he liked Chloe far less without an empire attached. He left her too, and Chloe, who'd never learned to stand on her own, because I'd always been the ground under her, fell, and kept falling. I heard things, secondhand, over 3 years, that she'd struggled, that she'd made bad choices, gotten involved with worse people, borrowed from the kind of lenders you don't walk away from. Every time I heard, something in me lurched toward the phone. And every time I stopped, because the last words she ever said to me, in that boardroom, still lived in my chest. She'd looked at me while my husband tried to erase me, and she'd nodded. I told myself I'd washed my hands of her. I told the sisterhood, when they asked, that I had no sister. I said it so many times I almost believed it. I didn't believe it. You don't stop being someone's mother because they broke your heart. You just carry it quietly, and hope one day the phone rings and it's her voice, older and sorry, and you get to find out who you'd be if you answered. The principal's envelope was that phone call, except it wasn't Chloe's voice. It was a predator's. using her as the hook. And the terrible genius of it was that it worked. Because the hook was real. Chloe was in danger. That part wasn't a lie. He'd just found a real drowning woman and used her as bait. I did not sleep that night. I sat with that photograph and that letter, and I did the math the way my mother's daughter always does. And every way I ran it, the numbers were unbearable. If I said no, the letter implied, with the soft menace these people have perfected, that Chloe's situation would be allowed to reach its natural, terrible end. If I said yes, I could save her. All it would cost was a single piece of information about Diane's plans. Just once. Just a little. I want to be honest with you, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes this story worth telling. I picked up my phone to do it. I told myself it was small. I told myself I could give them something minor, something that wouldn't really hurt anyone, and save my sister's life, and never do it again. I told myself Diane would understand, that anyone would, to save their sister. I told myself 100 reasonable things, which is exactly how every betrayal in every one of these stories begins, not with a villain twirling a mustache, with a good person, cornered and alone, telling themselves 100 reasonable things at 3 a.m. Do you know what they were counting on? They were counting on love. That's the part that still makes me cold. They had studied me, studied all of us, well enough to know that the lever that moves a good woman isn't greed or fear. It's love. It's the person she'd burn the world down for. They looked at my whole life and found the one door I'd never learned to close, the little sister I raised, and they knew that if they put her behind that door and made her cry, I would consider anything. They weaponized the best thing in me. That's who these people are. They don't corrupt your worst instincts. They take your finest one, your loyalty, your love, your need to protect, and they turn it into the knife. And I sat there at my mother's old work table with my thumb over that phone, and I was, for 1 hour, exactly the woman they'd designed me to be, alone, terrified, and certain that love required a secret. And then, with my thumb hovering over the phone, I heard my mother. Not about the recipe this time, about something she said once, near the end, when I asked her how she always knew who to trust. She said, "Baby, it's simple. The ones who love you tell you to come to them when you're scared. The ones who want to use you tell you to keep it a secret." She'd tapped my hand. "Anybody who says don't tell anyone, that's the one you tell everyone about. Tell no one." It was right there in the letter. In capital letters, almost. You have to tell no one. The whole scheme depended on my aloneness. It always does. It's the same weapon they'd used on Simone, on me, on every woman who ever walked into Diane's office. You're alone in this, and if you reach for anyone, you lose everything. Isolation is the lever. It's always the lever. I put down the phone, and in the morning, I drove to Diane's office, and I put the photograph and the letter on her desk, and I said the hardest sentence I have ever said. They're using my sister to get to us. And last night, I almost let them. I need help, because I can't trust myself with this alone. Diane looked at the letter for a long time. Then she looked at me, and she didn't look angry, or disappointed, or afraid. She looked proud. "Rachel," she said quietly, "do you understand what you just did? You just beat them. Right there. That was the whole game, and you won it in the drive over here." She slid the letter back toward me. "They don't lose when you feel tempted. Everyone feels tempted. That's not weakness. That's love. And love is the strongest thing any of us has. They lose the second you refuse to carry it alone. You walked in that door, and every ounce of leverage they thought they had turned to smoke." Then her voice changed, sharpened, and I watched the lawyer come back into her eyes. "And now they've made a mistake. A big one. Because to make this offer, Rachel, they had to reach out of the shadows and touch something. They had to find your sister, take her, hold her, prove it with a photograph. That's not a ghost anymore. That's a location. That's a chain of people. That's a thread." She leaned forward. "For years I couldn't find the principal, because he never reaches down far enough to be caught. He sells methods. He doesn't get his hands dirty, but he wanted to break the sisterhood badly enough that this time, he reached down and grabbed a real, live, frightened woman, and in doing that, he handed us the first physical thing we've ever been able to pull on." She almost smiled. They came to take your sister as a weapon against us. We're going to take her back and follow the string all the way up. Here is what the sisterhood does that the network never sees coming. We don't negotiate with the hostage taker. We find the hostage. Vivian and Elena traced the money because Chloe's debt was real, and real debt has real lenders, and real lenders have real accounts, and the sisterhood is very, very good now at following money upstream to the people who think they're invisible. Nora built the file. Catherine cross-referenced every detail in the letter for the seams, the small mistakes, the way she'd once caught a husband in his own too-clean folder. Grace, who understood better than anyone how a person gets managed and hidden, worked out where you'd actually keep a woman you were using as leverage. And Simone, who had once been exactly this, a person coerced through someone she loved, understood the psychology of it from the inside. They won't hurt her yet, Simone said. She's only valuable as long as she's a promise. The moment they hurt her, they've spent her. So we have a window. Not a long one, but a window. I sat in that room and watched them work, and I understood something I hadn't fully let myself feel before. Every one of these women had a reason to tell me no. I was asking them to risk everything they'd rebuilt, their safety, their hard-won peace, for a woman most of them had never met, a woman whose only claim on them was that she was my sister, a woman who, by any fair accounting, had earned none of it. Chloe had betrayed me. She was nothing to them. And not one of them hesitated, not for a second. Nora just opened her laptop. Vivian just asked for the account numbers. Grace just asked where they might keep her. They didn't debate whether Chloe deserved rescuing, because that was never the question. The question was whether one of us was in pain. And I was. So they came. That's the thing I keep trying to explain to people who ask what the sisterhood actually is. It isn't a law firm. It isn't even friendship exactly. It's a group of women who decided that the pain of any one of them is a claim on all of them. No ledger, no deserving, no fine print. It is the exact opposite of everything the network is built on. And sitting in that room, watching them mobilize for a sister who wasn't theirs, I finally stopped feeling like the woman they'd rescued in a boardroom 3 years ago, and started feeling like one of them. We found her in 11 days. 11 days that cost me more than I let the others see. Every night I went home and looked at that photograph of Chloe holding the newspaper, thin and frightened, and I had to trust that the plan was better than the panic, that the sisterhood's patient, quiet, upstream way would reach her before the network decided she'd stopped being useful. Twice I nearly broke and begged Diane to just pay them, just give them something, just make it stop. And twice Grace, who had buried an empty casket and knew exactly what it is to wait while someone you love hangs in the balance, sat with me and said the same thing. Fast is how they win, Rachel. They want you to panic. The panic makes you alone. We go at the speed of the plan. I hated it. I held on to it. It was right. Chloe was being held. Not dramatically, not in a warehouse with chains, but in the quiet modern way these people do everything. In a comfortable apartment. Watched. Her debts and her fear, the only bars she needed. A woman so isolated, so convinced no one was coming, that she'd stopped imagining rescue at all. Which meant the hardest part wasn't finding her. The hardest part was that when I finally stood in front of my sister for the first time in 3 years, I had no idea whose side she was on. Because here was the thing I had to face. Walking in, the principal doesn't just use people as bait. He turns them. He'd turned Simone. He could have turned Chloe. Could have offered her, too, some terrible, reasonable-sounding deal. Help us bring your sister in, and all your debts vanish. Chloe had betrayed me once already, for far less. Every logical part of me braced for her to do it again. She was sitting by a window when I came in. She looked up and saw me, and her face did something I will never forget. It crumpled, the way a face crumples when it sees the one thing it had stopped letting itself hope for. "Rachel," she whispered, "you have to go. You have to go right now. They're using me to get to you. They told me if I just help them, they'll... Rachel, they know you're coming. This is a trap. They set it up. They want you here." "I know," I said. "We know. We planned on it." And I watched my little sister, the one who nodded while my husband tried to erase me, the one I'd sworn I'd washed my hands of, make the choice that told me who she'd become in 3 years of falling. They'd offered her the same deal they offered me: save yourself, betray your sister, tell no one. And instead, with them listening, with everything to lose, she'd used the only seconds she had to warn me. She chose me. When it cost her everything, and gained her nothing, she chose me. The ones who show up when there's nothing to gain, I thought, in Vivian's words. My baby sister, at the very bottom of her life, with a knife at her back, had just shown up for me. It was a trap, of course. The principal's people had expected me, one grieving, isolated woman, arriving alone to save her sister, exactly as the letter was designed to produce. They did not expect what actually came through that door. They did not expect Diane Okafor, who had spent 15 years learning exactly how these people think. They did not expect a file already built, evidence already secured, the lenders holding Chloe's debt already traced, and already, quietly, facing exposure of their own. They did not expect that every piece of leverage they held over Chloe had been dismantled in the 11 days they thought they were still in control. They did not expect that when they reached to spring their trap, the trap was already, legally, financially, completely, sprung around them. The men who came to manage the situation that day walked in expecting a hostage exchange and a frightened woman to intimidate. What they found instead was that the frightened woman's debt no longer existed on any book they controlled, that the accounts they used to move their money had been flagged that morning, and that every threat they tried to make came with a quiet reminder, delivered by a calm woman in a good suit, of exactly how much documentation was already sitting with exactly the wrong people. You cannot hold a hostage whose chains have already been cut. You cannot threaten a woman who came in with the receipts to your whole operation. They arrived holding what they thought were all the cards, and discovered, one by one, that the cards had been counted, copied, and turned against them while they slept. Most of all, they did not expect the thing the principal will never understand, the thing that has beaten them at every single turn in every one of these stories. They planned for one woman, alone. They got all of us. We walked Chloe out. Her debts, manufactured and inflated by the network to make her controllable, the way they'd framed Simone's son, came apart under Nora's file and Grace's precision. The people holding her suddenly had far larger problems than one leverage asset walking free, and the string that ran from Chloe's captors upward. The accounts, the handlers, the careful chain of people between a frightened woman and the man at the top. That string, for the first time, was in Diane's hands. The principal reached down out of the dark to take my sister as a weapon. He should have kept his hands where I couldn't see them. Chloe and I are not fixed. I want to be honest about that, because these stories can make everything sound too clean, and my sister and I are not clean. She betrayed me in a way that changed my life, and warning me from a window doesn't erase that, and we both know it. We are not sisters who braid each other's hair again. We may never be, but she is out. She is safe. She is in a small program getting the ground back under her own feet. Her own ground this time, not mine. And we talk, carefully, on Sundays. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes she cries. Once, she said the words I'd stopped letting myself want. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I was so lost. And I found that I could hold both things at once, that she'd hurt me terribly, and that I was still, and would always be, the one who taught her to drive. The first Sunday after we brought her out, she asked me why I came. After what I did, she said, "You told people you didn't have a sister. I heard you did. Why would you come for me?" And I thought about it for a long moment, because she deserved a true answer, and not a kind one. Because the people who took you, I finally said, were counting on the fact that you'd hurt me too much for me to come. That was their whole plan, and I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to let the worst people in the world be right about who I am. She was quiet, and then she said, "That's a very mom answer," and we both laughed, wetly, badly, for the first time in 3 years. It wasn't forgiveness. Forgiveness is going to take a lot longer, if it comes at all. But it was a door, cracked open, that had been welded shut. I'll take a cracked door. I've built whole companies out of less. Here is what I learned, and what the principal will never learn, and what I think is the whole secret of everything the sisterhood is. You can love the person who hurt you. That's not the betrayal. Love was never the betrayal. The betrayal is when they convince you that to love someone, you have to do it alone. In secret, cut off, cornered, with no one to tell. That's the lever. That's the whole con. They don't need you to stop loving your sister. They just need you to think you have to save her by yourself. I didn't save Chloe by myself. I saved her with 7 other women who'd each been told, once, that they were alone. That's the difference. That's the only difference, and it's everything. There's a last thing, and it belongs to the war we're still in. The night we brought Chloe out, the sisterhood gathered in Diane's office, and for the first time, Diane laid something on the table she'd never had before. The thread. The chain of people, traced from Chloe's captors upward, closer to the top than she had ever gotten in 15 years. Not the principal himself, not yet, but the closest anyone has ever stood to him. He made a mistake, Diane said, looking at the diagram of names and accounts we'd pulled from the rescue. He got impatient. He wanted us broken badly enough to reach down and touch the world with his own hand. And now, for the first time, I can see the shape of the arm. She looked around the room, at all of us. We're not hunting a method anymore. We're not hunting a rumor. We're going up the chain, and the chain, at the very top, has a person on the end of it. She looked at me last. They tried to buy you with the thing you wanted most, Rachel, and you brought it to us instead. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how many people, cornered and offered their heart's desire, choose the circle over the secret? She almost smiled. That's why we're going to win. Not because we're stronger than them, because they can only imagine a woman alone, and we stopped being alone a long time ago. They came for my sister to break me. Instead, they reminded me exactly who I have standing behind me now. And they handed us the first real map to the top.